The Smorgasbord Radio Show.
Hi, this is Chris, and you've apparently stumbled upon the SmorgShow podcast. This is the Smorgasbord Radio Show, and this is being recorded on December 21st, 2019, and this is episode 110. It's been a while since the last episode. Typically, I don't really have an excuse for time passing between episodes, but I think this particular instance I do. My dad passed away. William Bockay passed away one day before his 79th birthday. So a lot of stuff's been going on out here, and I just want to kind of talk about what happened. I want to spend this episode focused on my dad and really dedicating it to him. And certainly anybody who happened to know him over the years listening to this show knows what a very special man he was and will always be. Touched a lot of lives. And I want to just spend a little bit of time on this episode talking about the journey that he took in the last several weeks and the journey I took to accompany him on that final journey. And I have also dug up some audio clips from over the years where he has come on to this show. I think only technically he only appeared on the show once. But then he also lended his voice to one of our old time radio shows that I'll play a snippet of that. And then I also have a very, very old clip that I think I've played it before on this show, but I think just bringing it all together just really will bring the whole thing together. It's when he called into my high school radio program. I think the year was early 1984. He called into Dateline when we had a couple of teenage girls in the studio with me. And it was all a joke, but I'll give more of a story when we get closer to that segment. So anyway, back, I guess our last show here was end of September. I was with Dave. And now that I think about it, the last 10 episodes or so, since Allie has been off in college, I've been kind of having to reinvent the program because she hasn't really been here. So I've been doing the old show with the show with my old radio partner, Dave and Jerry, of course. And every show has been different. We've been getting into some unusual topics, and certainly the last episode was extremely rare. And I'm going to continue that, I guess, with this episode. This is unlike anything I've ever done and the show has ever done. But that's okay, because the Smorgasbord brand name is supposed to be a variety of things. Smorgasbord, you envision a food table, a buffet, and that's what we have here. So I don't know where this show's going to go, but I just want to talk from the heart. So where I left off, Dave and I did our last show, and I guess it was a couple weeks later, mid-October. My dad was coming out here with my stepmom, and I'm going to refer to her as Mercedes, just to keep names and the story easy to follow. So my dad and Mercedes came out to Chicago. They live in Washington, D.C., and they were coming out for my birthday, which I guess, it's the 18th of October, but he came out the weekend earlier, so I think the 12th, and he was staying with his aunt because his aunt was turning 95, and I got a phone call on Sunday. I don't know, that's the 12th or 13th. I think it was 12th. No, I don't know. Doesn't matter. I got a call from him, and he was in the hospital. And he said that overnight he had some serious chest pains, and he thought he would check himself into the hospital, which happened to be only about 5 minutes down the road from his aunt which was good. But it was 2, 3 in the morning when he was just having some heavy, it was difficult to breathe and his chest was heavy. So they got him into the hospital. But at the time I talked to him on the phone, they said it wasn't a heart attack, but they're checking me out. So I got to the hospital that afternoon, and by the time, I guess since the time I talked to him and the time that I got there, they had confirmed it was a heart attack. So I'm not sure what that was all about. And they were keeping him under observation. And so my wife, Kim, Allie, and I got into we were already there. We were in the room for pretty much the afternoon, spending time with him, and he was talking and everything was fine. And he spent the next, I guess, a week and a half there. They said he had 2 blocked arteries. And we saw him a couple of times that week, but then I think towards the end of the week they had gone in to clear one of the arteries out, but they didn't want to, and they did the whole stent thing. And they didn't want to do anything else with the second one. It was a little more complicated. So they waited until they said you should just go back home to Washington, D.C. and have your cardiologist check you out and make a recommendation. So I guess he was in the hospital for another week or so after that. And then he was released and he came to stay with us. He said, I want to spend time with you before going back. And plus, I'm not in any condition to travel. I need to build my strength up, and I can't imagine trying to get back through the airport. I said, yeah, well, definitely stay with us. So I picked him up. We took him back here, and he spent the next week with us. And throughout that week, I saw his appetite getting better. His color was getting better. He was definitely walking around a lot more. And but towards the end of the week, he asked me if I would accompany him back to Washington, D.C., because he just couldn't, difficult to navigate the whole security and going through the airport. It's just a lot of stress. So I said, absolutely. So we got me a ticket. It was really a round trip ticket, just one day. I just went out with him, got him through security, which went fine. Flight was delayed, I remember. So we killed some time. We sat at a restaurant there at O'Hare Airport. It was Macaroni Grill. Just 2-3 hours because the flight was delayed for at least 3 hours. Finally got him back to his home. And I'm thinking, I'm pushing him around in the wheelchair. So it's, I'm just wondering if I'm earning my keep. You paid for this, last minute plane ticket, pretty expensive to get me there and back. I was wondering if I earned my pay at all. And he says, absolutely. Just having you here is, all I needed. And it really helped get me through security and through the airport. But then as we took a cab back to his house, it was dark and he was paying the cab driver, and he gets out and he's walking away. And I noticed he dropped his wallet on the sidewalk. And this is like in the city. And I said, Dad, you just dropped your wallet. I think I just earned my pay and earned my airfare. Because that would have been a nightmare, losing your wallet and your ID and your money and all that. And the last thing he needed to deal with was going to the DMV, So got him in the house and spent a quiet evening. This was, I guess, November 1st. It was a Friday. And the next morning I got up and I had a midday flight. Said goodbye to him, left. And that was the last time I saw him standing and talking and laughing. And the last time he hugged me. So I flew back home and everything seemed to be going in a good direction. And then a couple of weeks later, I talked to him on the phone after they attempted to do the second artery, and they weren't successful with it. They went in, they said, this is way too complicated. We really don't want to mess with this. So he called me and he told me that news. And I talked to him for maybe about, half hour, 40 minutes. And he said he didn't have any appetite, and we had just had a discussion about how it's important for him to stay hydrated and eat. And I was trying to lecture him as he had done so many times with me over the years. And that was the last time I really had a conversation with him. About 3 days later, I think this was Thursday, the 21st of November. I get a phone call at 6 a.m. From Mercedes. And I never get a phone call directly from her. It's usually my dad calling, and it's always his, my caller ID shows his name, not hers. She doesn't really use the phone much. Really relied on my dad to do a lot of things. So all she said was, your dad is very sick. His heart stopped this morning, and she had just gotten a phone call from the hospital in Washington, D.C. And she said, she started to tell me a little bit about it. And of course, my mind's trying to focus, trying to understand what she's saying and grabbing it all. She said, the doctor's coming in right now. Let me call you right back. Well, she didn't hang up the phone. So normally I wouldn't listen in on a conversation, but this was my dad, and I wanted to hear what the doctor had to say firsthand. So I'm listening, and it was kind of broken up because of the distance in the room. But I was able to make out a few things, and one was he's very sick, and it's probably advisable that his family be around him. And that's all I needed to hear for me to get off the phone and get an airline ticket to Washington, D.C. So I'm going to stop there for right now, and I would like to just play a clip, and then we'll come back and I will pick the story up where we left off. And later in the episode, I do have the eulogy that I delivered at his visitation that I'm going to play. Originally, I thought, no, that's a personal thing. I'm going to keep it. But no, technically it's not personal. The whole family heard it. Big room heard it. I want to put it out there so that it's out there forever. So I'll be back, but enjoy this. This is from this is almost 10 years ago. This is one of our very first episodes here. Allie and me. My dad was moving to Paris, and or maybe he had already been there, but we wanted to quiz him on his French culture knowledge because we thought it was important for him to know what where he's moving to. So we found this French quiz, and this is back in March of 2010, and I don't know if it was episode 6 or something like that, but it's very early on. So Allie's very young. She's probably 11, 12. And so enjoy this, and we'll be back in just a little bit. All right, the feature of the week, we have a very special guest in the SmorgShow lounge, Mr. William Bockay.
Hello, Chris. Hello, Allie.
Hello, Papa Bill.
Yeah, Papa Bill. Is that going to be the new thing now that you're 12?
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Glad to have you.
You could have had nicer weather for me, though.
How's weather in France?
Actually, just like this.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's raining a lot in the winter.
Yeah.
And probably in the 40s during the day and high 30s, no, to low 30s really in the evening. We'd get some sun, but mostly it's cloudy and rainy.
Yeah.
Kind of dreary. Looking forward to spring.
Now, you've been living in Paris for about 6 months now.
Right. Just a little over.
And why are you there?
Well, actually, I'm retired there, but my wife is working there. Your
My stepmother.
stepmother. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yes. I call her Mercedes.
That's because that's her name.
Oh.
She works there for the Spanish embassy and has a position in the commercial office as the head of the office before what they call the OECD.
Uh-huh.
And she's working hard, and I'm enjoying life hard.
She's not with the IMF, is she?
No.
Was
No,
she
no.
ever?
No, she was with the World Bank originally.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Well, fantastic. How's it going? How are you adjusting, assimilating into the French culture?
well, we knew Paris. With both of us, before we knew each other and afterward, have been there many, many times. Of course, it's different when you're living there because you experience it a little closer to the culture than when you just drop into a city, spend a few days, and get out again. But we love it. It's nice. It's a great city, a lot of history, beautiful buildings.
You have a view of the Eiffel Tower, right?
Yes, half of the Eiffel Tower out my front window.
Wow.
But we're very close, 2 blocks away.
Allie was there when she was about 4.
Yeah, I still kind of remember it.
Yeah, well, that's because of the videos, I think. I don't think you actually remember being there, do you?
Well, I do remember carrying around a stuffed hippo named William.
Yeah,
Where did you get that hippo? I forgot.
I don't know.
You had
I
it.
mean, we gave it to you, but where did I don't?
I don't know where you got it.
Yeah,
We still
I don't
have it
either.
here.
I don't know if it was from England or from France.
Well, whatever.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So
we
what we're
were
gonna-
in both places, so.
That's right. It was a nice European trip for you at age 4.
Yeah.
So what we want to do today is have a little quiz here with you to see how
Okay.
much you really know about France. And I decided to stay away from all the language questions because I
Good choice.
we'll stick with the culture. So this is stuff you would experience in any day situation. So
Okay.
we'll see how
Hopefully.
much you stand
I
out.
spent a lot of time watching TV, so
Okay, I think we've got about 15 questions here.
all right.
Okay, question number 1. This is all under the behavior and etiquette category. Okay, so you were invited to an evening meal at the home of your French employer or head teacher and partner. Does that make any sense to you? Head teacher and partner. Okay, your French employer. Should you take along as a present A, nothing at all, B, flowers for her, C, a bottle of wine, or D, some other small gift such as chocolates?
Well, that's a good question. I would say flowers for her.
Very good.
Hey,
Yay.
can I read this?
Can we stop while I'm ahead?
Well, let me give you a little bit more background on the answer. The
Okay.
most appropriate answer is B, flowers for her. A possible response is D, which is some other small gift such as chocolates, because it's usual to take some present for your hosts. If you take nothing at all, you may find yourself embarrassed when other guests arriving
Right.
at the same time as you.
It's interesting because we've had some parties and they brought chocolate.
Ah, okay. Go ahead and read question number 2, Allie.
Which flowers would it be untactful to offer someone in France? A, roses, B, chrysanthemums, C, carnations, or D, lily of the valley?
Well,
untactful to
most
offer somebody.
untactful. I really don't know the answer to this one, but I'm going to try to do a gut feeling on this, and I would say chrysanthemums.
That's correct.
Good. Most inappropriate gift is the chrysanthemum. Say that.
Say that 5.
Chrysanthemum.
Custom is evolving somewhat, but many French people are still associate those flowers with death and cemeteries.
Right.
Okay.
Question number 3.
Wait, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do I win anything if I get these right?
We'll see how many you get right at the
Okay.
end. You're doing really
Fair
well
enough.
so far.
Well, it's early.
Next question. At dinner, you are offered a piece of bread along with your meal, but have no side plate. Do you A, ask for a side plate, B, break your bread over your main plate and place the leftover piece on the plate edge next to the rest of your food, C, break the bread over the cloth/bare table to the left of your plate and replace the bread there, crumbs and all?
C.
That's correct.
Yes, the most appropriate answer is C. To ask for a plate would be to criticize your hostess. B, which would be the second choice, obviously, would involve too complex of a balancing act. The French go uninhibitedly for crumbs on the table. French bread is crusty.
Yes.
It's true and good.
Okay, for the next question. You are invited to a meal at a French person's home. Snails, which revolt you, are served as the entree. Do you A, force yourself to eat them, saying nothing, B, refuse them point blank, or C, tactfully acknowledge your I can't pronounce any of these.
Gastropodic?
Gastropoda?
I-
Okay.
Can you-
Gastropodic virginity, and say you will try one, but...
We got to do that over.
No, that's fine.
Well, it's nice to be some kind of a virgin anyway.
Torchew or to eschew?
Or
We got to start over.
you said this wasn't a French test. Anyway, I think those are the three. Or is there a fourth?
That was it. The three choices.
Well, that's a good one, because of course for me I like everything, so that wouldn't probably come up. Give me my choices again.
Force yourself to eat them saying nothing. Refuse them point blank, or tactfully acknowledge.
I see. Tactfully acknowledge.
Yes, actually, that is the most appropriate reaction. B might be embarrassing to the host.
Right.
And A would be brave, but might have unforeseen digestive consequences. In fact, you are unlikely to meet with snails or frog legs at the table, but you never know.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah,
because
sure.
that's kind of very interesting. Restaurants will have a lot of, well, I shouldn't say that. Many times at a restaurant, you'll see snails on the menu in France. But it's right about frog legs. I happen to like frog legs a lot. And they're not on any menu in any restaurant. The only way we can get them is we go to an open market and buy them fresh and do them at home. The French do not serve frog legs, even though we think here that it's a big French dish. Yeah. Do I get extra credit for that, teacher?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, next question, Allie.
Okay. In the French countryside on a rainy day, you pass a middle-aged person bent double on the grass verge looking for something. Do you...
Grass verge.
That's what I said. Do you, A, ask what they've lost and offer to help to look with them? B, assume they've escaped from a local institution? C, presume it's a tramp looking for fag ends? Or D, carry on regardless?
Oh, you carry on regardless.
Yes, correct.
Correct. Neither A, B, nor C would be appropriate. It is most likely that he or she is out picking dandelions for their rabbits. Rabbits kept to eat. Oh, in parentheses, yeah. Or out collecting snails.
There you are.
Okay.
I rest my, but not frogs.
No, not frogs.
Okay, next question. When traveling by train in France, you A, will have your ticket checked by an inspector on the train. B, need to have your ticket checked by an inspector on entry to the platform. Or C, must machine check your ticket yourself before entry to the platform.
Well, the ticket will be inspected on the train, I think.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
And C is also another possibility.
Yeah, I think the C1 is something new. It's a new system that they didn't have in the past.
Okay.
100% going here.
Yep. Okay. Next question. To travel on a bus in Paris, you need to A, buy a ticket in town before getting on the bus. B, buy a ticket from the conductor on the bus. C, buy a ticket from the driver on the bus. Or D, buy nothing as city center bus travel is free.
No, buy a ticket from the driver.
No, actually, the most appropriate is A.
Buy a ticket in town before getting on the bus.
Well, what kind of bus are we talking about? Are we talking about a rapid transfer or a bus to another city? Or
I don't know, it just says bus.
all right, well, I get one wrong.
It's kind of vague.
All right, do you want to start reading the questions?
Okay, next question. In France, crossing the road at a white striped pedestrian type crossing which has no traffic lights, should you A, wait until traffic stops for you, then cross, B, step out regardless and expect traffic to stop, or C, wait until there is something of a gap and then watchfully make a start?
C.
Very good. Glad to see you're practicing safe habits.
Although I do see people just walk out onto the striped area and hope the cars are going to stop, but I'm not brave enough to do that.
Yeah.
We got some crazy people in the world.
For sure.
Okay, in France, if you're stopped by a police officer and asked to show your identity, do you have to give your name and address but show no papers? B, give your name and address and take papers to the police within 3 days. C, have your identity papers on you and show them. And D, need to give no details and show nothing unless you are acting suspiciously.
No, I think it's C. You have to show your identity papers.
Very good.
We all carry an identity card in our wallets. Yeah. In fact, I'll show you mine later.
It's not a biometric card, is it?
No. No. It does have your picture, but...
Yeah. Okay, next question. In France, meeting somebody for the first time, should you A, shake hands, B, simply speak an appropriate greeting, C, kiss them on the cheek?
Depends if it's a guy. Well, this is an interesting question, actually, because I have seen guys kiss on the cheek. Shake hands.
Yeah, we'll take that. It's most appropriate are A and B together. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm sorry. I left out a choice there, but it doesn't matter. That was C, which would have been... yeah, it doesn't matter. Kiss them on each cheek.
Well, that's the way when you do kiss, you kiss on each cheek. In fact, some parts of France, they kiss on 3 sides.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
People don't have 3 cheeks.
I knew you were going to say that. That's why I said if that makes any sense. You do the right and the left and then the right, or the left and the right and the left. But it's 3. But I think that's in Belgium, not in France, if I'm not mistaken.
All right. Next question. In France, you are asked out for an evening by a group of French students. Are you likely to A, go on a crawl from bar to bar till you are pretty drunk? B, go to a cafe/bar, have 1 drink or 2, and talk a lot? C, go to a cafe/bar, have several drinks, and talk a lot?
Well, I'm unlikely to be invited anywhere by a group of French students anymore, but I would think from observation, it could be B or C. Probably C.
It says obviously it will depend, but B is probably the case. Many French students tend to have even less money than British ones, fewer grants, etc. Many will drink coffee or soft drinks only.
That makes sense.
Excess alcohol intake, or even any alcohol intake, is not seen as a prerequisite for having a good social time or loosening tongues.
Well, that's a good point for 2 reasons. One is, as yet, and it's only been 6 months, I really haven't seen some of the things you see in the American bars where they're, falling over drunk. I've not seen that anywhere in Paris. And they do talk a lot.
After a drink or meal in a French cafe or restaurant, should you A, leave a tip, B, leave a tip only if the service has been very good, or C, leave no tip at all?
Well, as an American, that's still uncomfortable for me after 6 months. They are paid a good salary, and there's a percentage, usually about 18% included in the bill for service. So many French people, for example, will not leave any tip at all. Or just a few coins to show the balance of the change of the bill, but no tip is required.
Yeah, in theory, it's illegal now in France to include or require a tip or change for service in restaurants. The bill should be the bill.
Yes, it is, and that's it. But it says in the bill there's 18% in there for service. Yeah.
That's not why you moved there, though.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Although you do save a lot of money that way.
Yeah.
Okay, in a French town, if you suddenly need to use a loo, should you A, look for the nearest public toilets, B, go to the cafe/bar and use the loo, C, go to the cafe/bar, order a drink, and then ask for the loo?
B.
Actually, C. I guess you should order something. I guess.
It's more polite to do it. That's true, but I mean you can more easily go into a French bar and go to the loo without taking a drink than you can in the States.
Yeah.
But okay, I'm committing a faux pas.
Okay.
Excuse my French.
Second to last one here. In France, a woman on her own in the mid to late evening, dying for a drink. I don't know where they ask these questions. Well, no, it wasn't really a question. In France, a woman on her own in the mid to late evening, dying for a drink, should A, enter a cafe and drink standing at the bar, B, enter the cafe, find a table and order a drink, C, resist and go thirsty till getting home?
Well, I've seen both, but I think it's proper. B would be probably the answer: sit at a table and have a drink.
Let's see. Well, it depend on the place and region and perhaps the class of cafe. But generally speaking, C is the most appropriate.
Oh, really?
A would be inappropriate and might lead to her being pestered. B is possible but not recommended. If a woman is by or in a major railway station, no problem perhaps, but beware. But if in a small town and obviously not awaiting transport, her situation could be misunderstood and she might either be thought to be soliciting or seen as easily approachable. Males in France can be unabashedly predatory.
That's true. And it's interesting because my experience is going to be only based on what we've done in Paris. And I've observed women come and stand at the bar and have a drink and leave. Mostly they sit at a table if they're going to be alone. But I could see where in a small town that would be misconstrued as a come-on or a lower class girl or something.
All right, here's the last question. Okay. It's summer and hot, and a young French woman is invited out for a drink for the evening. As she sets out to meet her friends, will she, A, set out in a skimpy frock, skirt, and top, put on a skimpy dress, but wear something less revealing over it, wear something attractive, but not so revealing, and D, dress as she normally does for the office or school?
Well, I think this is one of those, it depends on the situation, questions again. The French are sort of conservative. For me, I'd say they would put on maybe something skimpy with something on the top of that too. But I really don't know, and especially since I'm not a girl, I don't.
This is difficult gender and dress code territory. Much will depend on where she lives, her mode of transport to where she's going, who she's going to meet, and various social and personal parameters. However, young female, and to some extent male, fashion that currently appertains in the UK for evening bars or discos in town would be problematical, often in France, depending on time and place. A, which was the skimpy frock or shirt, would definitely be risky if she had to walk some way or take public transportation. I think you did pretty well.
Very good.
I missed all the ones about women.
Yeah, well, you can read the unabridged version later. So what I thought we would do as a next clip is actually take the listeners back 25 years to when you were on the radio program.
You are not going to do that. No. I don't think there's a, what's the word? I don't think there's a, what is it in legal circles when you after a certain amount of years.
Oh, statute of limitations?
I don't think there's a statute of limitations on this one.
Yeah, but you can go back to France.
I'm going to leave the room.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's my
thank
pleasure.
you.
It was fun. I enjoyed it. We have to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Come to France and we'll do a remote broadcast.
We will. Yeah, that would be excellent. We could do a podcast from France.
Podcast from the Eiffel Tower or the Arc de Triomphe or something.
Yeah, I've got remote podcasting equipment we can bring.
All right.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Papa Bill.
You're welcome.
Well, a couple of things there. You could first of all hear the very, very old equipment that we used to use when we started this podcast 10 years ago in the basement. Very poor microphones, echoing in the basement, and not so good audio quality. But I think it's just really special that we had that little conversation. And then towards the end there, he hinted that they were going to be playing another clip from high school. And yes, I will be shortly because I think that is a very classic recording from the old Smorgasbord radio show. So where I left off was my trip home from Washington, D.C. after I got my dad back home from Chicago. And, oh yeah, I'm sorry. I got the call to go back out there because he was not feeling well. Actually, his heart stopped actually. So this is Thursday, the 21st of November. I got on a flight in the afternoon, and I arrived at D.C. late in the afternoon, 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I took a lift or something over to the hospital. And when I got to his room, he was, all wired up, tubed up, breathing tube. He was... his eyes were closed. He was obviously very heavily sedated, and I just went up to his bed and I just held his hand and told him, "Dad, I'm here. I'm here for you." And that was pretty much the night. His eyes did open. He was responding to touch and squeezing his hand, and he would squeeze back, but he certainly was not in a position to talk with the breathing tube, of course. So Thursday night, it got to be 9 or 10 o'clock at night. Mercedes stayed at the hospital. They didn't really have any room for more than one person. There was basically a chair, and she slept on the chair all night. She wanted to be there. So I went back to their house, and I stayed there. And then Friday morning, I got up at 5:30, 6 o'clock, and I walked over to the hospital. They were probably about 2 miles down the road in D.C. And I arrived at the hospital, and I think he was awake, but very, very uncomfortable. Breathing tube still in, so he couldn't talk. He was trying to, for the day, pretty much, try to give me signals, nonverbal cues and things, like trying to turn him over or move him and lift his bed, try to get him more comfortable. And he was really, really uncomfortable with that breathing tube. And he was trying to take it out. And they, of course, had to strap his hands down because that would not have been a good situation if he had taken that out. So he was getting frustrated with that. But fortunately, throughout Friday morning, he was, his vitals were getting better. He was awake for most of it. But I think around noon, he got to a point where the doctors and the staff were saying, "We're going to try to take your breathing tube out because you're doing so much better." So they took it out. And he had it out for maybe about an hour and a half, 2 hours. But of course, when they took it out, his voice was really, really scratchy. It totally damaged the vocal cord. So he was still not able to have a conversation. It was just a lot of sounds. And a couple hours later, the doctors came in and they said, "We don't like what we're seeing. It's starting to revert back to whatever." And I don't know all the medical terms and what numbers weren't looking good, but essentially the bottom line was he had to go back on the breathing tube. And so they told me to leave the room because it was going to be they need to put him out and almost like an operation again to put the thing back in. So I went out to the waiting room until I got the signal that it was time to come back in there. And by that time, I think Mercedes had arrived because I'm trying to give her a break, let her go back home, get cleaned up, get some rest because she was in the hospital in the chair all night. I told her to get back and what happened. We went back into the room, and as he started to wake up and realized that he had the breathing tube back in, he just looked so dejected and he didn't want to be there anymore. And when I mean there, I think I really feel like he didn't want to be here anymore. And we looked at his eyes, and I think Mercedes asked him, "Are you mad?" And he shook his head. "Yes." And she said, "Are you mad at us?" And he shook his head, "Yes." And I could see that he was kind of upset that we allowed them to do that to him again. And she looked at him and she said, "You are going to get better." And my dad just shook his head. No, I think he knew. I think he knew his time was approaching. So I think this is, late Friday, the 22nd, and he had some friends. They had some friends stop in there after work, and I stepped out because they said that, you can only have 2 visitors at a time. So I gave them some space and sat out in the waiting room. Maybe I had some dinner down in the cafe or something. And I think he had 3 sets of friends come in to see him. And this was about 7 or 8 o'clock at night on Friday, the 22nd. And they left, and I went back in to the room. And I said goodnight to him. I said, I'm going to go back to your house, and I'll be back on Saturday, the next morning. And I don't remember so much of his reaction, but that was the last time I saw his eyes open. So I went back home to their house on Friday night. And then Saturday morning, I woke up again very early, and I started walking over to the hospital. And I got back up to the room, and it wasn't good. I mean, they were hooking him up to dialysis, and I said to Mercedes, I said, what's the end game here? What are we really trying to achieve here at this point? I don't remember exactly what his living will said, but he does have one. And I do remember reading it 10, 15 years ago when he had had a surgery back then. And I said, I don't think he wants to be in this situation. So we called back to their house. Mercedes' sister stayed with them for the last couple of days as well. And we said to, bring it over. Let's read this. So we're talking with the doctors and trying to get a sense for what's happening. And they said the medications were pretty much maxed out to keep his blood pressure up. And they can't do any more. They're totally maxed out on everything they can. And his blood pressure was still continuing to drop. And we got confirmation about that time that the living will. We got a copy of it. We're reading it, and it says all the stuff that you'd expect it to say. If it gets to a point that I'm being kept alive artificially through machines, I do not want that. I don't want to be revived, that sort of thing. And we said to the doctor, I said, we need to end this. We can't let this continue. He doesn't want to be like this. So we made the decision to end all forms of life support at that point. So I sat next to his bed and I held his hand. And I told my dad, I whispered into his ear and I said, it's okay to let go. Because I had heard that sometimes people who are fighting for their life are doing so because they're doing it for their loved ones. And if they hear that they're okay with letting them go, that the struggle, they'll stop struggling. And so I whispered in his ear and I told him, you've given it a good fight, Dad. It's okay to let go. And so I did. I held his hand. I sat there, and it was this is like so surreal moment for me that I'm never going to forget. But it was just, I'm watching these machines, and I'm watching all of the technology and the beeping and all the data coming off these things. And I'm just watching the numbers, the blood pressure, the heart rate, slowly tick downward till you get to a point where like the blood pressure is, 15 over 5. And then it's 14 over 3. And the heart is slowing, and you could see it's like 20, 19, 15. And I told Mercedes that I think it's getting close. And so she got on the other side of the bed and held his other hand. And what was really really special at this point was his love for classical music and jazz music, but especially classical music throughout his life. He always admired Allie and her musical gift and her abilities. You know, saw her perform at Carnegie Hall earlier in the year. He just admired her musical ability. And so I took one of her musical compositions that she did on piano just a couple months earlier, and I held it up to his ear. And so the last sounds he heard as he drifted off were those of Allie's composition, which I do have here to play as well, which I'll probably wait till close the show out with it. I think that would be appropriate. So I watched the numbers just continuing to drop, and they all just hit 0. And that was it. He was gone. It was just, I had never experienced anything like that in my life. And I mean, I guess it was a beautiful moment in a way. You know, it was very peaceful, and I knew he was in no more pain anymore. But the reality that he was gone was just, it was just unbelievable. And then, everybody coming in, and the machines are just turned off. They just turn them off like a TV. That's it. And it's perfectly silent in there. There's no more beeping. There's nothing. So that was it. That was Saturday morning about 7:30 or 8:30. It was 8:32 or something like that. Was November 23rd, day before his birthday. Who would have been 79 the next day. So I'm going to take another break here. Actually, let me play something really quick here. This is just like not even a minute and a half or so. My dad did a narration for one of our old time radio plays. We did something called The Ravine. Ray Bradbury wrote this one, and we had him just do the intro and the outro of the podcast the recording, the play. So let me play that, and then come right back.
The ravine was a dynamo that never stopped running. Night or day, there was a great moving hum, a bubbling and murmuring of creature. It smelled like a greenhouse of secret vapors and ancient washed shales and quicksands. And in the shade of warm trees, with her hands at either side of her like the oars of a delicate craft, lay Elizabeth Ramsell. Her face moonlit, her eyes wide and like flint, her tongue sticking from her mouth. Later that night, an ambulance arrived and brought out a body on a stretcher. The body of a man. Lucky for Lavinia that the sewing scissors were handy that night. Very lucky.
I guess I should have said spoiler alert there in case you wanted to listen to the program. What do I want to do next? I think I want to play one more thing here. This is, let's just go back. Let's go back to the Wayback Machine. We're going back 35 years now to 1984. And this was my dad. So let me set this up a little bit. So we used to do a date line. This was the season that I took. Dave and I split. We took our time away from each other. David did his own show on Sunday night, I think, and I continued Saturday night with a new partner, Jeff Baran. So you'll hear his voice every now and then here, but essentially it was my show with Jeff sort of supporting me. And we did Dateline. We would have, a girl come into the studio and just take phone calls from guys who just wanted to date. So This was, we had two girls in the studio. One was my girlfriend at the time and had her best friend there, who was, I believe she was single at that time. And we thought, let's take some phone calls. Well, my dad was listening, and he decided to call in. And you'll hear that my friend Pete, who also was part of the Smorgasbord days, he was living with us at the time, and he is on this call occasionally as well, or maybe towards the end of the phone call, if I remember correctly. But this was completely a very lighthearted joke. He wasn't serious. He wasn't calling in for a date with a 16-year-old, but it was just the spirit. This is the kind of humor my dad had. And we had a great time with it. Now, when it was over, in fact, you might even hear it towards the end. You start to hear some commotion in the studio. That's because not the general manager, but some of the other senior staff came in trying to break up they were listening to the show at the time, driving through the neighborhood, and they heard what was going on, and they thought this was serious. And they said, "This is unacceptable. This is illegal. And you're going to get us lose our license." And I'm trying to tell them, back off. It's all a joke. It's not for real. So I'm going to play that now, and we're going to come back, and I will talk to you about a little bit about, not so much the details about making the funeral arrangements, but what I had to do to give the eulogy, which we will close the show out with. But here it is from WDGC 1984, my dad calling into the Smorgasbord radio show.
So WDDC, 16 minutes after 11 o'clock. And we've been taking several calls during that song, and we've got another person that's interested in Talent Line. Not Talent Line, a Date Line, I'm sorry. And we're going to go to those phone lines, and I don't know. Let's do it. Hello? Hello? You're on the air?
Hello?
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 Yes.
Oh, you're there.
Uh-huh.
Ah. I've been listening to your Dateline, and I'm very, very interested in one of the girls that's at the studio.
Which girl are you interested in?
Shelley.
Shelley?
Yeah.
Let's hear a little bit about you first.
We need a description.
A description?
Yeah. How
well,
tall are you and what? How much do you
okay,
weigh?
I'm 6 foot tall. I weigh 185 pounds.
Sound like a real man. Yeah.
I like to think so. I work out a lot. I'm a 42-33. 16-inch biceps.
No more.
No more.
What color eyes?
Green. Actually, they're blue in the right light.
How does that happen?
I'm sorry?
It's like a whole prism thing?
Yeah, well, it depends on the mood I'm in. I mean, if I'm in a real romantic
Like a mood ring?
Yeah, right, exactly.
What color hair?
Dark brown.
Dark brown.
Just
How old
combed
are
it.
you?
Well, that may be a problem. I'm a little old.
How old is
Actually,
Shelley likes older men.
Chronologically, I'm old, but in my mind, I'm still a youngster.
Jailbait.
I'm 43.
Jailbait!
Oh, it's only jailbait if you get caught.
You could be her father, you know.
Well, that's possible. We could talk about that. Is Shelley there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Is
here.
she going to talk to me at all, or?
Yeah, I'll talk to you.
Oh, okay. Shelley, I love your voice.
Thanks. You don't have a bad one either.
Really, you sound terrific. I bet you're a lot of fun.
Thanks.
You think you could be interested in an older man, at least for a night?
We'll have to talk about it later. It's possible.
Pardon me?
Said it's possible.
That it's possible. Well, at least there's hope there.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of a guy do you like?
He's got to be romantic and a lot of fun.
I mean, all the flowers and that whole shtick, or
Yeah. Rich. Gotta have a lot of money.
how about a lot of debt?
Well,
Is that qualified?
That's rich potential.
Very good. Thank you. I have a promoter there.
That's right.
No commission for you. So, aren't you supposed to ask me questions or something?
are you cute?
Well, I think I'm average looking. Some women think I'm cute.
Uh-huh.
I think it depends on the mood they're in.
Do you have any kids?
No kids, but I do have a teenage son.
Oh. Okay.
You consider yourself a kid?
Sometimes.
Well, then, if you're a kid, he's a kid.
Okay.
How old are you?
17.
17. You've ever had an experience with an older man?
My dad.
No, not that kind of an experience. Have you ever had a fantasy about an older man?
Yeah, lots of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, can you tell me about it?
Not over the phone or air.
One of us is going to be arrested.
Really?
Well, let's see. How could we go about meeting?
Well, she's here at the station. Where are you calling from?
Well, I'm calling from home right now. I have a nice fire going in my bedroom.
Ugh.
The water bed is warm.
Is it a fireplace or is it just a fire?
Very good.
Well,
No, it's in the fireplace.
oh, okay, that's good. Well, I heard somebody back in the background there laughing.
Oh, it's
Is
just
that-
a friend of mine.
Oh, you've got somebody there now, huh?
Yes, I have someone for Audrey.
Oh, for Audrey.
What does he look like?
Well, he's cool. He's tall.
Uh-huh.
He's fairly handsome if you look at him the right way.
With
He
a
has
black
sandy
bow.
brown hair.
Uh-huh.
He's about 6 foot tall. He's a little trimmer than I am. Of course, he's a little younger.
Mm-hmm.
And,
How old is he?
He is 20.
Oh.
Oh.
Well, you're more interested in this. I'm hurt.
We're interested in you.
Oh, okay. Well, so listen. So what's the next thing then? I've only heard part of this Dateline, and I don't understand how you get together after you decide you're interested.
Well, we'll get your address later and
Okay.
phone number, and we'll call you.
Sounds. Oh, I've heard that one. Don't call me. I'll call you.
Oh, no.
Don't forget, I'm old enough to know this one. There's a lot of giggling going on over there. So, this is it, right?
Apparently you're really causing a stir here.
Oh,
In the
who's this,
station.
Jeff?
Yeah.
I'm causing a stir.
Well, there's a lot of people coming here now all of a sudden.
As long as they don't have badges.
Yeah. No, we're not on past 12 yet, so the police won't be here yet.
Oh, you have to sign off soon, don't you?
No, we still got plenty of time.
Okay, well, I guess we've carried this far enough, haven't we?
Okay.
I'm definitely interested in pursuing this if there's a way to do this.
Okay, we'll get together sometime.
Hello? Oh, here's my friend.
Hey, what are you trying to pick up teenage girls again? He's always trying to pick up teenage girls. What's the deal here?
How many times have I told you not to get on the phone when I'm on the phone?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there like I bet there's like some teenage girl on the other end of the line, right?
Yes.
I swear this guy, all he ever does, I mean, you should have seen the 13-year-old yesterday. Oh. Stay away from him.
Okay, we gotta go.
Well, I guess we'll put you on hold and talk to you while we play this song.
Okay.
All right, thanks for calling.
Sure.
Hold on.
So, yeah, I heard it at the end there. Yes, you could hear some people just showing up to the station. There's probably like 3 or 4 people trying to just reaming me out, saying, "You got to end this segment now." So that's why I vanished towards the end. My dad was a kidder. He was funny. So, what I'd like to do now is move into the next segment. We've got a special guest phoning in on the SmorgShow hotline. My good friend from many years, many decades, Peet McCain. Hey, Pete, how you doing?
Hello, how are you doing?
Good. Good to hear you. Good to hear from you. It's been a long time since you've been on the show.
Good to be heard.
I was talking about this on the earlier part of the show, but I appreciate you coming out from Cleveland to my dad's funeral and service and all that. It meant a lot. And yeah, it was good to see you there.
It was great to be amongst people who remembered Bill, for the various reasons. Even like his business colleagues and of course Mercedes and your family and all that. It was really great. It's a shame that he had to die for us all to get together, but
yeah, that's typically how it happens.
But it was great to have so many people that have so many great memories of him,
Yeah, it was really neat for me to hear from his work colleagues coming up to me, and just sharing the stories with him, and I was hearing different perspectives of stories that I had heard about him before or from my own vantage point, and it was just great. But so you and I share a very common era together with my dad. You moved in. I don't remember the circumstances. You probably remember them better than I do. But at some point you came to live with us after my parents were divorced, and you became like a roommate while I was still in high school.
Right. Well, what happened was I was living with my uncle and aunt at the time, and they were hoarders. And so I was living in squalor and then going to visit you in a very nice house. And he was kind of moving out in a way. He had met Mercedes, and he was spending most of his time at her house. So he basically needed somebody to watch the house, more or less.
Well, I was still living there. I hadn't moved off to college yet. You had stayed on longer than I had gone off to school for that reason, to watch the house, as he was spending more time in the city with her. But there was a period there where you were living with us for a year. I was a senior year in high school. My dad had already started to date. And we spent a lot of time while I was a high school senior in a house, which was probably, he trusted us a lot to live there by ourselves. And I think we behaved ourselves for the most part, but
we did. Well, except for the days before, after we knew it was sold, I think we did really phenomenal, especially for teenagers.
Yes. Yeah. We had a party on the way out right before the house was, well, we sold the house, and then I think a week later we were going to be moving out. We had a party, which was one of those stories that I told my dad gradually over the next 30 years of how many people actually showed up. It's like, oh yeah, we had 20 people, Dad. And then, a couple of years later, we tell the story. It becomes, oh yeah, the 50 people. And you try to slip it in under the conversation without anything being noticed. At some point he triggered, what? You had 120 people there?
Yeah.
People calling in on
and
senior radio.
I remember it was BYOB, and we threw out about an excess of 25 garbage bags.
Yes.
Of cans and bottles.
That's right. I don't know.
It was insane.
Garbage day must have come before he got back to the house, because I think if he would have shown up and seen a pile of 25 garbage bags, I think that would have been the indicator.
The jig would be up. Yeah.
But I think the thing that sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and but for the most part, we took very, very good care. And in fact, we're very good caretakers in that we did not we didn't want people over, really, and we would bring individuals, but we never had parties. And
no.
I think it is, maybe because Bill was so good to us, I don't know, maybe I'm making something up, but, trying to figure out why we were so good, because, in general, we did the same stupid stuff that other teenagers did. But that's something we never did.
No.
Maybe we liked the house a lot.
Yeah. We weren't really big partiers, drinkers, or anything like that.
Right.
Well, the thing that I remember the most back then, I think, maybe the thing that I've held deeply close to my heart, were the conversations that we used to have when we used to go to Papa's Pizza, which was a pizza establishment not too far from the house. And we'd go there on the weekend, and we would just spend hours there in the booth, and we would just talk, and it would just be the father to son type talks. And I just remember some of those topics. But that's where I got my talks.
Right.
The birds and the bees, or whatever you want to call it. Those are the place. That was the place.
Well, for me, I didn't have a person like Bill in my life at all. None of my uncles were anything like him. Certainly not my father. My father was a very quiet man. Did a lot of reading. did not do much communicating of any kind. So Bill was different in that way, in that he was gregarious and outgoing, and so I had a lot to learn from him. I was like a sponge, and really learned how to interact with society. And Papa's Pizza, one of the great things that I learned there was to be, it's a bad word for it, but maybe overly thankful, right? Like every time that the waitress, Mary, I think was her name,
Mary, yes,
would come for anything, she'd get 3 thank yous from all 3 of us.
Yeah, we were polite kids.
Well, I was a polite. I learned to be polite from him. If it had been for my father, I would have been silent. And I have to, that's something that I have to fight in my life, even to this day, is silence as a reaction to things, because that was my father's reaction to things, and including as something as simple as getting your food delivered at a restaurant. And so when it at some point it was probably tiresome, because Mary was a great waitress, and so she'd see us every 5 minutes, and we'd be saying thank you every single time, all 3 of us, not in unison or anything like that, but
we made an impact. We made an impact on Mary, because when I went back there years later, she was still working there, and she remembered the 3 of us.
Right.
From 30 years earlier. So.
Right. Yeah, and we came so often. That was it too.
We were
probably
there,
every week for 3 or 4 or 5 years, almost.
Yeah. Oh man. So any other standout moments that you want to share?
Well, yeah. I was under 21 at the time that I was living there, and Bill had told me, he would usually get like a 12-pack of beer or something like that, and he'd only come and visit once every 2 weeks, or maybe he'd get a 6-pack. I don't remember what it was, but he'd only come once in a while, and he stayed all that time, all the rest of the time over at Mercedes.
Right.
But when he would come, he would be like anticipating. He would walk in the door and he'd be like la 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 la, and then he'd go to the refrigerator to grab a beer, and he'd go, "Oh, Pete," because I would only drink 1 beer a day,
but he was gone 2
by
weeks.
the end of a week. That 6-pack was gone.
The 6-pack was gone.
It's
like, I don't ask for much, Pete, but I expect you, if you drink the beer, to replenish it.
Exactly. But I had no way to replenish it. And so some of those trips to the pizza place, what was it called again?
Papa's.
Some of those trips to Papa's included a trip to the liquor store next door.
Yeah.
And I'd give him money for it, but
you just couldn't buy it on your own yet.
It's just that it wasn't there for him when he arrived.
That's right. When he wanted it, when he could taste it the most. Yeah.
And so that was another learning thing from him, that even though you're playing by the rules, all of the rules, sometimes the rules are like kind of against you, because because I had no way to replenish.
Yeah.
So there was that, and then outside of that, the many meals that we shared, and his great humor were important for me to learn from. I keep on saying, that about the things that I learned from him. And he wasn't a mentor, he and I did not have a love relationship. I wouldn't, I certainly loved him, but he didn't love me back. But that was okay. I was a person in his life that he appreciated, and he had a lot of people like me in his life.
I don't really know
because of how he was.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that he didn't love you. I mean,
No, it's like he had like an agape sort of love, like a, or like a religious sort of love. Yes, there was love. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not trying to say, I suppose that. I'm just saying I wasn't like another son to him. I don't think.
We don't know, honestly. I mean, you were always around, so I think there might have been more than you're giving him credit for that. I think we were inseparable back then.
It's on his side. So, he was just the absolute, maybe one of the primary influences on my life. Certainly, maybe second only to my own parents. So wherever the love fits into it, but he loved the world in a way, and that's what I reflect.
Sure.
So,
okay.
And then I also mentioned at the funeral that or maybe I didn't, but the fact that he had an amicable divorce, that was the first time I'd ever heard of such a thing, or had any sort of concept of it.
Oh yeah. I mean, with my mom and him separating or divorcing and then getting back together many times over the years through family gatherings, there was always, it was an amicable separation for sure.
Yeah. And that was absolutely unheard of. I mean, certainly nothing on TV, nothing in real life. I used to live next door to somebody that got divorced, and the woman's husband, showed up with a gun one time, and we're living next door to him in that place where you and I met, that in Bolingbrook.
Oh, Bolingbrook, sure, yeah.
Yeah, and so like her door was next to our door, so when he was out there with a gun, he was in our yard, more or less. So wow. It was, that was my real life experience of divorces.
Yeah.
And so that was an important thing to know about that exists. So and now it seems to be somewhat. I'm not going to call it common, but it is certainly more common. His was the first I'd ever heard of, and now it's not uncommon. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Okay.
So I guess those are a few things.
Yeah.
There's lots more.
Yeah, I'm sure. No, but I appreciate you calling in and sharing some of that. Wanted to get that fit in here. Just doing a retrospective of his life on this, and just trying to honor him the best I can with something permanent to go out there for the record. As people search for his name and come across this, they'll hear his recordings and my eulogy, and just a tribute to him, I think will be good. So
that's great.
Well, thank you for calling.
And thank you for putting this together.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. Well, you have a great night, and a Merry Christmas if I don't talk to you.
Merry Christmas to you. What I'd like to do now is, so my dad passed away on the 23rd of November. This was the Thursday or Saturday before Thanksgiving. So we had tons of family coming in starting Monday. So I spent Sunday and Monday. Oh, my dad loved Scotch, and when we went back to the house, the day he died Saturday, went back to the house Saturday afternoon. And then Saturday night, my dad's brother-in-law is Lou Marini from the Blues Brothers. And so Mercedes' sister is married to him. So her sister, Lou, and I, and Mercedes all gathered in the TV room. And on the fireplace, the mantle there, he's got his Johnny Walker Scotch sitting there next to a bottle of Pepto-Bismol and a salt shaker. So we decided to pour a drink and toast my dad. And it was sort of his birthday eve that we toasted him. So I stayed Saturday night, Sunday, and then headed back Monday, and then, tried to enjoy Thanksgiving week with the family who did come in to see us. But because Thanksgiving was in there, the funeral had to be delayed, another week or so beyond what we normally would have done. So it wasn't until the 4th and 5th of December that we had the visitation and the funeral the following day. But during there, I think the day after Thanksgiving, I drove up to the church. Well, not to the church, but a man from the church whose job is to coordinate the funeral and to work with everything from ordering the prayer cards to picking out the right casket and the flowers and just everything. It was like a one-stop shop. This guy was amazing. But he was going through the order of service of how it was all going to work out. And he was saying that when he was talking about the actual day of going to the church, the day of the funeral, he said, and then the eulogy will be given, and the father will be giving this, or the priest of the church. It's an Eastern Orthodox church. This is the church that I went to when I was growing up with my grandma. So like my mom and dad, they would drop me off. I would spend the weekend with my grandma. And it was usually a few times during the year. On a Sunday, I'd go. I went to Sunday school there every now and then. And then obviously not so much Christmas, but definitely Easter. Every Easter, that's where we would go. But I always knew that it was this, big, formal Orthodox church with all the incense and all the rituals. Very, very formal, very conservative. And they said, the father will be giving the eulogy. And I said, excuse me for a second, has the father ever met my dad? Does he know anything about him? I said, well, I don't know if he's met him. I don't know how much he knows him. I said, well, how can he possibly give the eulogy? I'm going to give the eulogy. And they said, no, you're not allowed to give the eulogy. Nobody stands up there except the father. I said, well, how is he going to know what to say? I said, well, you can prepare some words for him. I said, no, these are my words. I'm going to deliver the eulogy myself. I don't care where I have to do it. So here I am. I'm about to get into a fight with the Eastern Orthodox Church. And I know these guys that I'm sitting with, they have absolutely no authority in the matter. They could take the request back, but it's going to be denied, and I don't need that stress. So I said, fine, I'm going to give it at the visitation. And in hindsight, I think it was probably the thing to do. It was definitely more intimate. I didn't want to have this big grandiose platform with a big echo chamber of the vaulted ceilings and all that. And just, I thought it would be more appropriate to do it at the visitation. So I had a lot of time, since it's been about 10 days since my dad's passing, to actually write something. So I had a lot of time to reflect, try to remember my favorite memories. So I wrote this eulogy, and I gave it at the funeral home. Sort of off in the distance is a slideshow that was on repeat. Try to get as many pictures pulled together from the different family members. Certainly going through all my photo albums over this past couple of weeks and just taking pictures. And I had to send it into, again, the same guy who was coordinating everything so that he could get it put on a DVD and whatever and play it at the funeral home. So that's going on in the background. And my good friends showed up. So Pete came out from Cleveland for it. Dave and Jerry. Well, Dave was there for the funeral, for the visitation, and Jerry was there for the funeral. Jerry was actually one of the pallbearers and Pete was too. As was Allie and her fiance. So it was very special. So I think what I want to do here in closing is to play the eulogy. And then right after that, I'd like to close out with the very last sounds that my dad heard on this planet, Allie's composition, Danza della Piume, which is Dance of the Feathers, which is Italian, but in the eulogy, I kind of mess up and I say plume, which I guess would be Spanish, the Spanish version of it. But either way, Dance of the Feathers was what my dad heard as he drifted off into the next world, and I think it's very beautiful. That's how we'll end the show. Thank you so much for listening, if you have been this whole time. If you knew my dad, you knew what a very special man he was. I won't go on anymore. I think my eulogy pretty much sums up everything that I had the strength to get through in front of 50, 60 people. So that's how we'll close the show. I don't know when we'll be back next. We are coming up on the 10th anniversary of the show in January. So I don't know what we're going to have planned for it, but I do expect us to do something to honor the special day. Allie has just graduated college. So that's a big, in the midst of all this, that was something we could actually celebrate. So big year ahead, 2020 coming up right around the corner, and lots of changes going on in this family as Allie starts to look for work and moves out, and a wedding just a couple years away, and lots of things going on here. But that's life, right? Thanks for listening.
Dearest friends and family, thank you for being here today as we honor the life of my father, William Nicholas Bockay. I'd like to spend a few minutes here tonight to talk about my favorite memories of my dad and to share the impact that this man had on my life. This is the man who shaped me and helped form the man that I became. Bill Bockay came into my life at the early age of 6. He came into my life at a time that my mother and I needed stability. Bill Bockay was that stability. My mom and my biological father divorced when I was 3 years old, and my mom remarried a couple of years later to a man named Sandy Chesler. Once they were married, we moved from New Jersey to Columbus, Ohio to start our new life. During that time, I made frequent plane trips back and forth from Ohio to New Jersey in order to visit my biological father. My new father, Sandy, was doing all he could to establish himself as a father figure for me. I don't have a lot of memories of that time period, but I do know that he loved me, that he considered me his son, and that I called him Dad. Just as we were getting our feet back on the ground, Sandy was diagnosed with cancer. He shielded a lot of his illness from me, but I do remember that he told me that he would soon be going to heaven. He eventually passed away at the young age of 39. I was only 6 years old and just experienced my first death of someone. Again, I don't remember a lot of those details from this time period, but I can only imagine what it was like for a little boy to become close with someone he called Dad, only to lose that person to such a terrible illness. During that period when Sandy was battling cancer, my mom met Bill Bockay, who was a very close friend and work associate of Sandy's. He was there to comfort us during our loss, and my mom eventually married Bill. Bill Bockay was exactly the stability that my mom and I needed after several years of uncertainty. The following year, at the age of 7, I left my friends behind in Columbus, Ohio, and moved to Illinois to start our new life yet again. I started 3rd grade that fall in new school and met new friends. For the next several years, I lived what seemed to be a pretty normal life. I did all the things normal kids did, and my bond with Bill Bockay continued to grow. Our vacation spots included Disney World, the Bahamas, Lake of the Ozarks, and eventually camping trips that involved canoeing down the Flambeau River in Wisconsin. I have many pictures from those vacations, and I look very happy in those photos, which have been playing in the slideshow today. One of my all-time favorite memories of my childhood, you know, that one thing when somebody asks you, what's your favorite memory, it immediately comes to mind. It's when I was in the Cub Scouts. One Cub Scout tradition is the Pinewood Derby races. For those not familiar with this, it's the idea is that the scout works with an adult, usually their parent, to build a race car from a kit of materials that includes pine wood block, plastic wheels, metal axles. They encourage you to be creative, but that you stay within design specifications such as a weight requirement. It allowed the scout to get creative with the design by applying decals, paint, anything that you wanted to add to the car to make it cool. You had a few weeks to work on your car, but in the end, all the scouts brought their car back to race each other on the track for a trophy. This is one of those father-son activities that I will never forget. My dad went to engineering school. He was probably the last man alive who could still use a slide rule and explain how it works. So he had a really great time advising me on how to build the best car from an aerodynamic standpoint. Over the course of the next few weeks, he and I worked on my car, and he did something that I guarantee no other team did. He figured out how to distribute all the weight of the car in the front so that it would travel faster on the track. He drilled a hole out of the bottom of the front of the car and dropped 4 or 5 metal washers into it, sealed it up with putty, sanded it, painted it. This wasn't cheating because it was still within the weight specifications. It wasn't a fancy car, not a lot of bells and whistles on it. Any weight that would have been added from decorations was instead used by the metal washers that we planted inside the body. When it was done, as a kid, I was just disappointed. It didn't look as cool as I had dreamed it was going to look. It was just this plain white car with wheels. But it did the trick. We won the race. It's a very simple memory, but one that sticks to me, and it's very special to me when it comes to my mind when I think of my childhood. After a few years of marriage between Bill and my mom, Bill approached my biological father about a very difficult and sensitive topic of adoption. As I understand it from conversations I've had over the years with my biological father and Bill, there was a great deal of resistance in the beginning about Bill's request to adopt me. But over time, as my biological father saw the type of life that Bill was providing me in Illinois and how happy I was, he agreed and he signed the paperwork. In March of 1978, at age 11, I became Christopher Bockay. During that same year, Bill found out that he had cancer. This was one of the first of many health ailments that he would deal with over the course of his life. My mom and I, of course, were devastated, thinking that we would be going through another transition all over again. But fortunately, my dad pulled through. Yay, Dad. Also that year, we started construction on a new custom home in Naperville that my dad designed. There were many issues and hurdles related to building that home, many that don't have enough time to go through here. But it was a great home that I spent my formative years. And there aren't too many memories that I have today that I think back on that time period of my life that doesn't revolve around that house. So what kind of a kid was I? I'd like to think that I was a good kid for the most part, staying out of trouble. I was always a relatively introverted kid. As an only child like Bill was, I spent a lot of my free time in my basement recording studio that Bill built for me. My interest was radio broadcasting, and I wanted to be a disc jockey. So he constructed me this little room in the basement where I could live out that fantasy. And this kept me off the street and out of trouble. However, one instance comes to mind that contradicts my claim of being a total angel. The only time that I ever remember seriously getting into trouble was related to my obsession with the telephone. Sometime around the time I was 12, we got three-way calling, the new telephone service that enabled you to have a conversation with two parties. I used this great technological advance to call directory assistance operators around the country. The way I did this is I would call one operator on one line, let's say in Honolulu, Hawaii, and as the phone was ringing, I would hop onto the second line and quickly call an operator in Anchorage, Alaska. And as the phones were ringing, I would connect the two lines together and just listen to the operators talk. Why did you call me? I didn't call you. Over and over again. And each time yielded a different outcome and conversation. It was very funny to listen to. But unfortunately, this is the time that directory assistance went from being a free service to 20 cents a call. So my dad received a phone bill in the amount of $1,000, which, do the math, 20 cents a call equated to 5,000 directory assistance phone calls. He fought tooth and nail with the phone companies. Like, there's no possible way that I would call directory assistance 5,000 times. The phone company came out to the house, sent their tech agents to investigate the wiring. They said everything checked out. The charges were legitimate. So the next stop was to see what I knew about it. My dad was quite furious when he confronted me and asked me whether I knew anything about it. To this day, I still find it unbelievable that I really made 5,000 calls. I always acknowledged that I had something to do with it, but I never fully accepted and admitted that I did that all the way. So I'm here today. I think this is the appropriate time and place to finally confess that it was all my doing. I'm sorry, Dad. It was all me. I don't remember ever getting any punishment that was equal to what I had done. But looking back, my dad was a very forgiving man, rarely ever raising his voice unless I deserved it. He was very slow to anger. And I still maintained a healthy fear and respect for him. The words, "Wait until your father gets home," was impactful for me. My dad was the first person in the family ever to get a college education and always spoke to me about the importance and benefits of having one myself. So there was never any question that the path that I would take would involve higher education. My dad was always there for me when I needed help along the way with pretty much any subject, but his mathematics, business, and engineering background came in handy as I struggled through algebra in high school and accounting and finance in college. Outside of helping me with homework, my dad and I had many impactful father-to-son talks during my early to mid-teenage years. We used to have those conversations in one of our favorite local pizza establishments, Papa's Pizza in Woodridge, which is still there, a couple miles down the road from where we lived. My friend Pete here and I spent a lot of time with my dad in the same booth every weekend. Those were very meaningful talks that shape a young man and stick with him for life. That restaurant still stands today, and just a couple of years ago, I had a chance to take my daughter there with me and told her all about the talks that we had there. And I think I might have struck up something with you as well about how not to get into debt or something. It was about this time that my mom and Bill were divorced, and he met Mercedes. Over the course of the next 36 years, Mercedes and my dad created and shared a wonderful life together. They shared the same interests, a love for music and the arts. The two of them traveled the world and created countless memories together. Mercedes, thank you for providing my dad with such a wonderful life. Thank you also for all the love and support that you've shown him, particularly over the last few years. He was always in the best of care when he was with you. Parallel to all what was going on in my dad and Mercedes' life, I continued on with my life, building it. I graduated high school, then college. I landed my first real job in the city. I moved into my own place. I supported myself, met the woman that I would marry. We bought our first home and had our first child, our only child. My dad was always among the first who I would race to share the good news with. He was there for every major milestone of my life. My dad was also a fantastic grandfather who absolutely adored Allison, our only child and my dad's only grandchild. He shared Allie's passion for music, which goes back to the very beginning of her life, when she received her first toy piano for Christmas. My dad was always impressed with her music skills and her knowledge of music theory. He came to many of her choir concerts and piano recitals. Most recent one this past March, where she performed at Carnegie Hall in New York City. In fact, the very last sounds that my dad heard as he passed away was Allie's own original piano composition, a piece called Danza della Plume, Dance of the Feathers, as I held the recording up to his ear. In the days since my dad's passing, I have been overwhelmed by the number of people who knew him, sending me notes of how much they adored him and admired him. Looking back, I'm not aware of a single enemy that my dad ever made. He never spoke ill of anyone, and I never heard a single bad thing ever said about him. When people think of my dad, they think of a kind, funny, knowledgeable, caring man who had an appreciation for everything in life and who was full of life himself. To me, Bill Bockay was a solid rock who provided me with my compass. He was a friend. He was my dad. I'm going to miss our happy hours together. We always looked forward to when my dad and Mercedes would visit us. Those happy hours always consisted of music, fun talks, corny jokes, bad puns, discussions of random, obscure topics, and always a Johnny Walker Scotch for him. So, Dad, cheers to a life well lived. I will love you, and I will miss you.